Hello, I'm Michael Wybrow, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about how you can modify some of the visual design aspects of your app. So at this point we've looked at a range of different UI elements and we've seen how we can interact with them, and now we're going to see how we can modify them a little bit to add color and personality to our apps. In general, less is better, and as much as possible I would suggest you follow the human interface guidelines. It is certainly possible to go over the top with things like color and design choices and do modified fonts and crazy colors, and the apps can look terrible. So be careful about that. In terms of colors, it's good to think about a color scheme and a particular color or a set of colors. This can be as simple as specifying a global tint color. So certain items that are interactive, like buttons, either filled buttons or buttons with icons or bar button items, they usually have a particular color to let the user know they can interact with them. By default, this is a blue color, and you can set this to anything you want via the storyboard. So if you want to have your app have a kind of purple personality, you can, and you'll see some of Apple's own apps use these. So for example, the Notes app has a yellow color, the Mail app has a blue color, and the Music app has a pink or a red color as its global tint color. And if you use system colors like these ones, you'll notice this palette is very familiar. This is the set of colors that Apple use in their own apps in the iOS home screen. If you use these ones, they adapt well to dark mode. If you create your own, like we did in Lab 2 via the asset catalog, you need to specify variants that work well in dark mode yourself. And there's a number of websites that can help you with color choices. Be aware that things like system colors, there are named UI color objects for things like labels, secondary labels, tertiary labels. So if you're creating your own interface elements, you should make use of these. And then if you're creating your own colors for these, you should take into account their sort of properties, which is that labels are typically darker than secondary labels. Of course, I'm talking about in light mode. We saw in Lab 2 how we can make use of asset catalogs to have color sets, and we can specify variants for light and dark mode. Here's an example with a purple color and violet color. It's also possible to do global styling of certain elements, for example, the navigation bar. Now we can do this via what are called proxy items, where we ask the navigation bar for its appearance proxy, and that's applied to instances of the navigation bar. Now, this is where you can do this kind of customization, but it can actually be a lot of work to support it. So even to do something simple like set the color of this, there are a bunch of issues here. So first off, you get an appearance item or instantiate an appearance item. You can configure that to be opaque because some navigation bar appearances are transparent and we want ours to not be. We set a background color, in this case just a UI color. To get the text color here, we use text attributes that can be used to specify a different font or the font weight, whether we want bold text or not. In this case, we're specifying a dictionary with a single value, a foreground color, and passing it a UI color white. Next, we ask UI navigation bar, not an instance, but just the class itself, for its appearance proxy. And to that, we can set the tint color, which is responsible for doing the back button color, which is not something you can do through the navigation bar appearance object. And then we pass it the appearance object that we've modified. And we have to do this twice. And this is because as of iOS 15, navigation bars have different appearances depending on whether content is scrolled to the top. So if you're at the top of content, they don't have a line, there's no color, they're completely transparent. Then when you scroll down, they become a visible bar with some opacity. So if we want the same appearance for both of these, we have to specify the standard appearance and the scroll edge appearance. And even then, you can see that in this screenshot, the status bar is displaying black instead of white. This is something that is not easy to change in iOS 15. It's kind of a bug. I don't have a really good suggestion for how to do this. It's you can do it, but it sometimes goes back to being black. So I think that's just a problem in iOS 15. It's also possible to style individual elements in the storyboard. You can just select them, and in the attributes inspector you can choose things like colors for their selected tint for this segmented control and its background. It's also possible to do exactly the same thing in code. So if you've got an outlet to a particular UI element, you can just look up these properties in the documentation and set them to configure them that way. We talked about SF symbols as images that we could use, and we showed a couple of these in our workshops on the navigation bar, and also used them in our icon for the weather in Lab 2. But it's also possible for you to specify your own icons, and you can use these for the app icon itself, for navigation bar buttons, and for tab bar buttons. There's a number of online sources you could use for these. We've given a couple here. Google's material style icons that are used in Android are also similar stylistically to iOS's SF symbols one, so they're not a bad choice either. So for the app icon, this is something that's used for your app on the home screen. It's also used in the settings and for notifications and for Spotlight and a bunch of other places. The app icon, the largest size you're going to need, or in fact the minimum size you're going to need, is 1024 by 1024 pixels. If you upload an app and release an app on the App Store, for the App Store itself, App will require you to provide the icon at that size, and then smaller versions are used in the interface. For example, if you're just talking about the home screen, I think the 3x version is 360. I think it's 240 actually by 240 pixels. So, okay, I could look at it here. 60. I guess it's 180 by 180 actually, because it's 3x times 60 pixels. And you can just specify the single large icon and it will be rescaled, or if you're worried about how things like text might be rescaled to, or some of the fine detail might be rescaled to small sizes, you can specify individually crafted versions at all sizes. And look, in general, this is a little icon I just did for the YouTube channel for the unit. Typically you wouldn't have text, or at least English text, on an app icon, because if you're going to sell it in multiple places, you just want to have something that's just an image itself rather than includes text because of things like localization. If you want to specify your own icons for things like bar button items, you have to be aware that different iOS devices have various resolutions. Old devices like the very first iPhone used 1x images. Then when they had Retina screens, which are 4 pixels for every one traditional pixel, these were 2x, as in they're doubled in each dimension, x and y. And now our devices are rendered with content at 3x size and then scaled down. So the current iPhone uses 3x images. What this means is if you're targeting currently sold and available devices in use, you typically have to provide 2x and 3x versions of images. And you can name your images like this to begin with. I think it's a good way to do it, and put at 2x and 3x. And when you drop these onto the asset catalog, it'll recognize this extension and categorize them like you see here. And then when you want to use these images that are in the asset catalog, it's pretty easy. All you do is wherever there's a selected image in the storyboard or something, you can just search for it by name and it will show up. So that's very easy. And then if you want to use it in code, there's a initializer for UI image where it's got named and you give it a string, and you can specify the name from the asset catalog in exactly the same way that we do for UI color instances. Okay, thanks for watching.